Hello and welcome back to Rooted in Caribbean, our Women in Leadership series. Today, my guest is Alicia George. She is an experienced attorney at law with over 20 years called to the bar. She received a Juris Doctor from St. John's University School of Law, Queens, New York, in 2004 and was admitted to the New York Bar in 2005. She also holds a legal education certificate from Hugh Wooding Law School in Trinidad, which she received in 2008 when she was admitted to the bar there in 2009. Alicia is a real advocate for those who are less fortunate. And Alicia is a firm believer in Christ and fellowships at Kingdom Revival Center in Long Island, New York, under the pastorship of Senior Pastor Apostle Dr. Aretha Wilson. Let's just welcome Alicia and allow her to just share from her experiences as a child all the way up to adulthood, and how her time in the Caribbean has shaped her into the woman in leadership that she is today. Welcome. Welcome back to Women in Leadership, our series rooted in the Caribbean. So today my guest is Alicia George. Now Alicia is a really good friend of mine, and we shared office space for a while. 2016, is it, Alicia?
Into 2017.
Yeah. So I am really, really, really happy to have her join today. And although I'm in the UK and she's in the US, really warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you, Dominique.
Oh, thank you. So, Alicia, first question.
Yes.
Tell us about your Caribbean roots.
Well, my Caribbean roots are deep. My mother, of course, is from Trinidad and Tobago. I am from Trinidad and Tobago, but my mother was born to two Trinbagonians, literally. My grandfather was a Trinidadian from Cumana, Toco. And my grandmother was from Tobago. So I'm a real Trinbagonian product, right? And then on my father's side, my father was born to what we would call a cocoa pio. She was a mixed up Trini woman, red skin with long hair. And my grandfather, whom I never met on my father's side, was from St. Vincent or Grenada, I think. So those are my roots. I am completely a Caribbean girl living in the U.S.
A real pillow.
A real pillow. Commissioned to the United States of America for God's purposes. But I am a Trini. And those are essentially my roots.
Your roots.
Yes.
So based on those roots, and as you said, they run deep from what you shared.
Yeah.
Well, how have those roots shown up in your career to date?
Oh. Look, I think all Caribbean people are people who work hard. I think we come from that kind of stock of working. I mean, our history, we know our history out in the Caribbean. We worked in the fields, we were indentured slaves or servants, and we know about working. And I think that's what leadership, or how leadership translates for me. I've always been a worker. Wherever I go, whatever I do, I'm working, and I'm working or trying to work to the best of my ability. And so I believe that in leadership, what we do is that we work. We study to show ourselves approved. Even when we are moved from our homelands, as I was moved into the United States when I was 14 first, I always felt like I had to work. You had to show that you were worthy of being where you were. And, you know, the Lord brought me from really humble beginnings. I'm from Junjun, Trinidad and Tobago. Okay? Really humble beginnings to really poor parents and grandparents, to the United States, where I also started off in really humble beginnings, East New York, Brooklyn, and propelled me to Vassar College.
Mm.
When myself and my best friend, were introduced to Vassar, we were just like, Vassar, we had never even heard about it, right? But God sent this woman. He sent this woman who told us, because we were fifth, I was fifth in my class in high school, and she was second. And she was just like, you guys could go to Vassar. I was just like, Vahu? I didn't know anything about Vassar.
Yeah.
And when we did the research and realized, okay, I don't know that we could get into the school, but God, we did. And
Right.
so my point really is that even in high school, I was fifth in my class. And it was just this sense of always needing to work and show yourself approved.
Approved.
And that's what I did. And that's how I see leadership. I think that I am to lead by example. And
Right.
my example is to work hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear them say it's almost like a cliche, work hard to get the things that you want and blah blah blah. But it was real for me because I came from humble beginnings. And there was no
Yeah.
way that this little girl from Junjun who was born to a 16-year-old mother, was going to make it unless I worked hard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
that's what happened.
yeah. And do you think that based on those upbringing beginnings, being a woman in leadership has been a tougher journey for you?
Yeah, it has been to some degree. Because unfortunately, while you're striving to work hard and while you're striving to whatever goals that you've placed before you, there are persons who are looking on at you and don't necessarily want you to succeed for whatever their reasons. And they try to get in the way of that. And in order to surpass that or to overcome that, you have to work even harder. You have to show yourself worthy. It's almost like you have to prove. And one of the things that I faced when I went back to Trinidad, unfortunately, was that kind of like, well, you're American, you not really a Trini, you've been in the US for, at that point, 18 years. And what do you think you coming to Trinidad to do? And I heard it literally said to me, and I knew it was being whispered, and I had to show myself worthy. And so I had to work harder to show that, yeah, I maybe all of that may have left Trinidad for all of these years, but I'm still just Trini, and I'm going to show you, that's what I am.
What you're made of.
That's right. But what I was heartened about is that when I left that particular job and I started my own practice, one of the persons who was like ahead of one of the divisions, she was friends, she and I were friends, and I invited her. And one of the things she stood up and she said was, Alicia is the type of person that if you want something done and you want it done right, you go to her. And if you go to her and she doesn't know the answer, she'll tell you, I don't know, but let me go figure it out and come back.
Yeah.
And that was my modus operandi. And when you're doing things, but you don't even realize that people notice that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or that's who you are, that's how you operate. When I heard her say that, when I started my practice in Trinidad, I was blown away because I was just doing me. I was just being who I am, because whatever I put my name to or my stamp to must be excellent. And then when I became a believer, it wasn't just about me. it wasn't just about studying to show myself approved. I mean, I'm using that language because now I'm a Christian, but it then
Yeah.
became everything I do as unto the Lord. And so everything I put my hands to do, once I became saved, and at that time I was saved, it became as unto the Lord. And so I wasn't even thinking about that, but to hear her say that, and I was like, that is what I do. I do everything as if I'm doing it as unto God.
Wow. And would you say that there are things that you've experienced as a leader? Because, I mean, let's be honest, as an attorney for as many years as you've been, and now as a judge, yeah, you're almost a unicorn. You know, there aren't as many um, others who look like you, who sound like you. How have you been able to navigate that?
Honestly, Dominique, I don't think I navigated it because I cannot do anything without my Lord and my Savior. I really, and I'm not just saying that to sound cliched. I'm not just saying that to sound like, falsely humble or something, but I had to come from a place of really believing in me. I have I have been through so much personally that it took a lot to believe in Alicia. And so
Professionally.
exactly. So everything that I did only after or while God was with me. I did it afraid. I did it thinking, I can't do this. I did it thinking, hearing the voice of people, who do you think you are? I did it thinking, you're not smart enough. And so all that I did, it is because he downloaded, the Holy Spirit, let me name him, the Holy Spirit of God downloaded, he guided me, he helped me. When I first came back to the US, this time in 2021, I came out of trauma. And my first job was a job when I came back to the US, was a job I was in trauma. I was working in an environment that was full of trauma. I was working to help persons whose children were removed from their care by the Administration for Children's Services.
Right.
Trauma. So I'm in trauma, and I'm trying to help you out of your trauma.
In trauma. And this is in the middle of the pandemic because...
Yeah, this was in 2021. Pandemic was still going on, not full blown anymore. No, I fibbed. Take that back. I came back in 2021, but my first job was in the start of 2022.
Got you.
So, towards the first quarter of 2022. So we were just coming out of the pandemic. We were still, when I started the job, we weren't even going to court physically. We were doing court online. And in answer to your question, that navigation was difficult. And it was God. And I, in the middle of that, was just like, girl, what you doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, Lord, I hope I'm really helping these people. But I did.
Yeah.
And I walked away from that job with a few clients who were so devastated that I was leaving. And not because I had done anything unprofessional with it. I just showed them kindness, the kindness of God. There were a few of them who I felt led to and I knew I could pray with.
Yeah, and I guess in navigating those traumatic experiences, you yourself were able to manage your own trauma through that time as well.
Yeah.
And would you say that it was more difficult being a woman in that role? Or was it easier? Did you find that you had, the toolkit in place?
I think it was difficult on two fronts, being a woman and being from the Caribbean. So
Right.
when I first came back to the US, we're talking, I had been in Trinidad for 16 years and speaking like a proper convent girl, but with my heavy Trini accent. And I come back to the United States of America. My first job in early 2022 is in court.
Yeah.
And I had to switch so that folks could understand me, right? One. And two, I encountered people. There was one example in particular where this Caucasian woman, an attorney, was representing the child, because everyone has an attorney. The child has their own attorney, the parents have their own attorney, and if it's a married couple, sometimes we would represent them both, but most times we were split. So the mother had an attorney, the father had an attorney, the child had an attorney. And the attorney for the child, we were in a conference. We weren't in the court setting, but we were in a conference, a virtual conference. And she had the nerve to say to me, after I had passionately placed my client's position on the table, she said something to the effect, this is not about us being emotional. This is about us being, dealing with the facts and
So your position was deemed to be emotive
rather than passionate.
Yeah.
Rather than doing and giving and saying the very best for my client. Right?
And we're talking about at a point where post-pandemic life had been so difficult, people were picking up their pieces.
That's right.
And as you said, coming from being in the Caribbean at the start of the pandemic and experiencing that yourself, you were transitioning to this environment, utilizing that sort of knowledge and insight.
That's right.
Yeah.
And just feeling the extreme need to grant grace, but then also being held within the confines of this law that has been put in place to govern this particular area. And just really seeing that the law at times was not always being followed to the T, or it was being followed so much to the T in a situation where
the individuals were being lost.
Yeah, could have been granted, and so
Yeah.
it was like, it was really difficult. And being a woman who was passionate
Yeah.
in the defense of these parents mostly, and being from the Caribbean, I was faced with
a lot of obstacles.
Mhm.
Yeah. And would you say that there are elements of being a woman in leadership that causes us to have to compromise? And have you ever had to, compromise, whether it's your work-life balance or...
That is a good question, Dominique. And I don't know that I have compromised much, and that's probably why sometimes I encounter the difficulties that I encounter. Because if I believe a thing, and if I believe that that thing that I believe is the truth, or that I am standing on the truth, there is very little room for me to compromise. There were times in that same job that I was telling you about where the only way I compromised is if the parent wanted something else.
Right.
So I may have felt like, this is what we need to do.
Yeah, we're gonna dig our heels in.
But the parent was like, that's not what I want. And there were reasons, valid reasons, that they didn't want that. Either because they were being candid with themselves in that I need to do some more work on me before this child comes back.
Before the child comes back. Yeah.
And so let me do these programs that are being suggested. Especially if there were persons who were drug addicted. Let me do the program. Now, not that I was fighting for a child to go back in a scenario like that, but I'm saying there were times when my inkling to really push hard or drive hard had to be pulled back because that's not what the
Yeah,
parent wanted.
got you.
But
Yeah.
other than that, if I am, you see, because I always really try to, I'm not saying I'm perfect and I'm not saying I'm always right, but I
Mhm.
try my very best to always be led by God and led by the Spirit of God in everything that I do. And if I feel very strongly about something because I have that go ahead,
Connection. Yeah.
I'm not really moving,
Yeah.
except the client doesn't want it because it's them that I represent, right?
Yeah. You know, as women in leadership, I personally feel that we often sacrifice a great deal. Because like you said, you know, when especially when you know that you're standing on solid ground and what your the stand that you're taking is um vital. But often what you sacrifice might be relationships, and it could be with colleagues, it could be with family members, but or you sacrifice time often because you're going above and beyond. You talked about researching and um, pushing to ensure that you just got it right
Right.
for whether it was your client or someone else. How has that level of sacrifice shown up for you as a woman in leadership?
Yeah, that now I have no children, so I don't have that level of sacrifice. Bless the Lord.
There is still sacrifice.
but 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 I definitely sacrificed time. I definitely sacrificed one relationship in particular.
Mm.
And those sort of sacrifices didn't feel like sacrifices to me in the moment because I was doing whatever it is I loved doing. It was, I had this, and we're only talking now about when I had my private practice, right? Because that's when time was my own. When you worked for somebody else, when I worked for an organization, you work from 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever the case may be. And I've always worked for government, right? Outside
Right.
of my private practice, I've always worked for government, even here in the US. Before I went back to Trinidad, and when I went to Trinidad, I worked for government. When I first came back to the US in 2021 and got my first job in 2022, that was the only time I didn't work for government. That was a not for profit organization I was working for.
Right.
But I always had these time constraints. So I would
So
sacrifice
sacrificing your time.
time. That's right. On our weekends to do that. But mostly in the context of when I was doing private practice, yeah, time didn't matter. I was home and then when I was working during the pandemic when there was work, forget it. I was just working. I would just do whatever I needed to do it, particularly now because a client was paying me.
Yeah,
And
done.
so time was definitely sacrificed. And the relationship at that time was
Okay.
sacrificed.
And in your career, if you look back on your career now, what would you say was the defining moment as a woman in leadership?
A defining moment as a woman in leadership. I think it would have to be, there are two moments.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked for the Ministry of National Security, there was one particular project that I was given that I put my all and everything into. I was trusted with that project out of nowhere. It's like, we want you to do this. And I did it to the very best of my ability. Because of how government is in Trinidad, it ended up not really seeing the light of day because government changed. So I was working on it right around the time that we were coming into a change of government, and it really didn't go anywhere. But I put my all into that. I think that's when people saw me, saw who I was, and what I was
When you were
capable of.
made of. Yeah.
So there was that time. And then the other time was on the constitutional law case that I mentioned, that I was asked to do this thing, and I had to be like, God, you want me to do this? And he took me through it. And again, there was it's interesting because there was a lot of opposition because of this nature of the matter, the law. It was a constitutional challenge, and there was a lot of opposition to it. And I always kept walking around thinking, these people, they're probably just hating me, because here I am standing on the other side of this thing, and standing for what I believe, because God chose me to do that thing. And so even though there was no recognition in that one, it was a defining moment for me.
Yeah. And often with circumstances like that, even though you don't see the end result at that time, often when you look back, you recognize how much of a defining moment it was.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And that's what's, in hindsight, that's what it is. Because actually the judgment just came down. It was taken. I didn't work on the appeal part of it. I worked on the lower court part of it, the high court part of it. And then it was taken to appeal. But by the time it was taken to appeal, I had come back. So
Okay.
I didn't work on the appeal part of it. So the Court of Appeal judgment just came down last week, literally. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. And to see it come to that place and come to that head where the decision was in favor of the organization that I represented,
Right.
really took me back to like, okay, that's why you did that. Like,
Yeah.
again, you may not get any recognition. I ain't getting no recognition from it. So I know that I said that there were two defining moments, but there really is a third. And the third would have to be that after I came back from Trinidad and Tobago, after being in Trinidad and Tobago for 15 years, coming back to the United States in 2021, getting my first real legal job back stateside in 2022, and then in 2024 being appointed an administrative law judge. I mean, how does that work? I don't know anybody. I didn't know anybody. There's a whole story behind how this happened, how I was appointed, how it happened just days after I left my first job, because the Lord had been prodding me to leave my first job, and I didn't leave right away. And as soon as I left, 3 business days after I left, I got the call for the interview for my current position. And then the Lord was, he said to me, I was waiting for you to leave. And it is only after I left that he did what he wanted to do, which was have me step into this judiciary role. Now it's a quasi-judiciary role for now, but there's a plan. There's a plan, and this is where he wanted me to begin. And I have to say that this is one of the most defining moments for me. I didn't see it coming. I wasn't expecting it yet. But yet here I was, and it was all God. So I unfortunately don't have one defining moment. I had 3, 2 that occurred when I was in Trinidad and Tobago, and this last one once I came back to the US. And I just give God all the glory for all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look back, since we are looking back, when you look back, are there things that you would tell your younger self? You talked about when you were in high school and, someone suggested that you might apply for this prestigious college.
Yeah.
One, you hadn't heard of it before, but now that you have, blazed a trail as in terms of the legal sphere that you operate in, what would you look back and tell yourself?
I would tell myself to be more confident.
Mm.
I would tell myself to be more confident in who I truly am. I would tell myself that there are things locked inside of you, young Alicia, that you don't even know. So be open to unlocking those things. I think that if I was a bit more confident about who I was and what I was capable of, even the things that I did would have been done better.
Got you.
Even the things that I did would have had more of an impact, not for me, because I've always worked in social services, even when I worked for the government, right? It was always for the help and betterment of society as a whole, or persons or individuals. Social services, social area, administrative law, always wanting what I did to help somebody.
Someone else.
Yeah. Exactly. And so if I was more confident, I could do that better. Not for me, but for others. I remember an experience that I think has shaped everything I do since I was about 10 years of age.
Okay.
And just as a quick aside, so that it makes sense, the Lord eventually revealed to me that He loved me through my grandfather. My grandfather died when I was 12 years of age. But for the 12 years of life that I had him, he was my everything. I loved him, still love him to pieces. When I was about 10 years of age, going to Nelson Street Girls RC School, I was walking home from school one day, because before that, my grandfather was so protective of me, he used to come and stand in front of the gate to pick me up from school every day. That's the kind of love relationship I had with him. But this day I was walking home, and I walked home with two friends. So there was about 3, maybe 4 of us walking home. And so I was part of this group, but they were taunting this little girl. She was walking in front of us. She was an East Indian girl. And they were taunting her and teasing her, and they pushed me, and they were like, go pull her hair. Go pull her hair. And I listened to them. And I went and I yanked that girl's hair. She had a long braid. One like corner going back and one long braid behind. And I held on and I yanked her. God forgive me. Anyway, I got home and thought I was scot-free and that I was okay. That young lady came and knocked on our door with her father. I saw them coming. I happened to be looking out the window when I saw her, and I was like, oh my God. I ran inside, Dominique. I was living with my grandfather because my mother, like I said, she was 16 when she had me. But by that time, she had gone back to work. She had gotten a house in La Joquita, and she had moved to La Joquita. But I stayed in Port of Spain with my grandfather so that I could go to school.
School was.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was really living with him. So when I saw them coming, I ran. Because I was like, you in trouble now, girl. I ran inside. And I was inside and I could hear them, her and her father, telling my grandfather what I did. And he called me. And I told you this was my love relationship in my life. And he never hit me, never beat me, never to that day. That day was the first. And he called me with such sternness in his voice. He said, Alicia. And my family don't call me Alicia. I won't tell y'all my nickname. But he called me by my full name. And I knew I was in trouble. And I came out, I was like, yes, Daddy, because that's what I called him. And he said, did you pull this young lady's hair? And girl, I stood there and I lied. I said, no, Daddy. No, I didn't. He said, Alicia, I'm going to ask you again. Did you pull her hair? And I said, no, Daddy. And he said, well, you know what? I believe her. Because I don't think she would have come here with her father to complain about what you did if you didn't do it. And he said, let me tell you something. And for the first time, my paws are raising even now. For the first time, this man who I adored beat me, and he beat me in front of these people. And he said, now, those of you who are listening, that's what happened in the Caribbean, okay?
In the Caribbean.
We got corporal punishment. But I didn't get it from my
At least we did.
disciplined. But I didn't get it from my grandfather. I would get it from my mother, but not my grandfather. And he beat me in front of her, in front of them. And he told me, he said, never again. After they left, he beat me and they left. And when they were gone, he said to me, he said, never again you lie to me. One. I learned 2 lessons from him that day. And that's why to today, I hate being lied to. And I try my best not to lie to people. I really, really do. 2 lessons. He said, never again do you lie to me. And never again do you follow anybody. You are a leader. Oh my God,
Yeah.
my paws are raising. He said, you are a
Wow.
leader, not a follower. Never again do those things. And I said, yes.
I told you that at 10.
10. And I said, yes, Daddy. And I went inside and I cried more. Listen, the beating wasn't even bad when I really look back.
It's the embarrassment.
It's the embarrassment and the fact that he beat me at all.
You disappointed him. Yeah.
That's it. It hurt me to my core because I love this man so much. He was the one who showed me love unconditionally. He called me his pet. And to have disappointed him that way and to have him beat me in front of these people, I was so hurt. But I walked away from that with those 2 lessons. Lying, I don't like it when people lie to me. And when I know you're lying to me, it just really upsets me. Like, why? You don't need to. Right? And 2, I am a leader. I am not a follower. And I walked away with those 2 things from the age of 10. Now, a lot of life got in the way after that.
But you kept that, yeah, that life lesson.
That's right.
Wow.
So that's where my leadership instinct comes from. Like I said, even though life got in the way and things and people try to make me feel blah, 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 I would still always do my very best. And you cannot, even to today, you can't get me to do something that I don't want to do or that I don't think God is telling me to do.
It's the right thing to, yeah. Wow.
Or is the right thing to do. That's right. You cannot.
Yeah. No, you made my paws raise, not, and that stayed with you all of these years.
All of these years. That whenever I recount it or remember to tell it, I don't tell it often. It just came to me. But whenever I remember to tell it, my paws still raise. I still want to cry.
Wow. I guess the last question I wanted to ask Alicia, in terms of your legacy, what are the 3 words as a woman in leadership? What are the 3 words that you want your legacy to be defined by?
It is so interesting that you asked me that because God gave me 3 words.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. When I was doing my practice, and it's actually, I wish I had one of my old business cards. I would show it to you. The 3 words that I live by and want my legacy to be based upon is mercy, justice, and truth.
Wow.
And
so those 3 words were on your business card.
Yes. And those
mercy,
3 words came from Abba Father. And even before I was saved, Dominique, I felt things so deeply. Mercy was a part of me, even before I was saved. Mercy was a part of me. Justice, I couldn't stand to see someone mistreated. I would stand up and get in. Actually, Girl, I got into a fight, my first fight in high school. Not that I'm boasting about fighting people. First physical fight in high school was in defense of a teacher.
Oh, wow.
A young lady who was also from the Caribbean, so it's why it bothered me so badly, disrespected this teacher to no end. And I knew she wasn't trained that way because she was from Trinidad and Tobago. And she disrespected this teacher. And I said, girl, you just need to sit down because I can't believe that's what you're doing. And back then, I was about, what, 14, 15? What? Yes, 14 or 15 when we started was I think my first year in high school in the U.S.
Yeah.
And you know how they like to taunt. So when I yelled at her, the whole class was like, woo. So they instigated the whole thing. And that led to us fighting because she looked at little old me. I was real skinny, real skinny. And she thought she could do whatever she wanted. So after the class, every time she saw me in the hallway, she would pass and nudge me with her shoulder.
Right.
I gave that girl 3 days to do that. And then we fought, but we're not going to go into that.
When you were fighting, defending someone.
Defending someone. So mercy, justice, it just was not just. Mercy, justice, and truth. And I just told you the story.
Why?
About people lying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so God gave me those 3 words, and those are my hallmark. I try to move in mercy, always being just, which is why I'm in the field that I am in.
The field you're in. Yeah.
Justice and truth. And there, sometimes you think in this field of justice that there's no room for truth, but there is. There is.
Yeah.
There is.
And by stating that so emphatically, because there are so many adages around lawyers or the legal system, but by putting it out there, making yourself vulnerable, in that way and transparent, I think is such a commendable thing. So thank you.
You are more than welcome, girl. This is who I am. This is what I do. Mercy, justice, and truth. And I was doing it even before the Lord labeled it, and He gave me those words. He gave it to me while I was when I was starting the practice. Those are the words that He gave me that He wanted me to live by. And I try to live up to those words to this day. And I mean, even though now I am really an administrative law judge and those are the words that I intend to live by as I go forward.
Your legacy.
Yes.
Wow. Alicia, thank you. Like I could keep talking, but I really, really appreciate your time today, and it has been an absolute pleasure that you've been so willing to share. And I know that this will touch some young woman or young man, but I just think that it's so important that young women can look up and see others who look like them, sound like them, and feel represented. So thank you.
You are so welcome. It was a total pleasure to be here and to talk with you and to answer those very poignant questions, some of which I have not thought about brought
for many years.
From many years ago. So I thank you for the space and for the opportunity.